All
Okay,
right.
can I hit?
You can do whatever you want, but
I'm just,
you're lower
I'm
live.
typing a tweet.
You in fact can tweet.
And we're
So this
live.
Sweet.
this is an interesting way to start an episode. That we're all on three continents. The sun never sets on Cloud Foundry.
Even though it is after dark. Well, it's dark where some of us are. It looks like there's a lot of sunlight where you are, Casey.
Yeah, it's 5 in the evening. It's beautiful, sunny evening after a little bit of rain here in Tasmania.
Wow. So you're in Hobart. So I actually looked at Google Maps and tried to figure out, how I would get from Sydney to Hobart. It suggested I take a ferry. Google Maps always wants you to take a ferry. What's up with that?
I think that's an upgrade from Swim when they had that in.
I assume you did not swim to Australia.
No.
Almost would have been faster though.
Yeah, it took something around 56 hours from home to hotel. Thanks, rain in Dallas. Yeah.
Isn't there like a hurricane or something near Dallas?
Unrelated, but yes. Also, there was a hurricane.
But different rain.
Yes, different rain.
So not to get
Yeah.
too sidetracked, but the fact that we're having like the most powerful hurricanes ever recorded, is that like is that a bad thing? Is that a bad sign?
I mean, it's a sign of catastrophic climate change. I think that's table stakes by this point.
Only if you prefer scientists giving you that information. Yeah, it's definitely a thing.
I mean, it's terrifying, says the people who just incurred a bunch of carbon guilt by getting on planes.
Yeah.
It's probably fine.
So yeah, Andrew is coming at you live from California. You can tell by the lovely wood behind him, because this is the stock Andrew podcast locale.
This is where I live. Yes.
And I'm in Amsterdam. This is my hotel lobby. It is 7:02 in the morning.
So I'm the only one not going to conferences this week, but there's like 7,000 conferences this week or something.
I think most of them are in the front, like in the front yard of the Pivotal offices in San Francisco. What's up with that?
Well, the Oracle World one, Oracle Open World or whatever.
Kind of a big deal.
There's also the OpenStack thing.
In Tokyo.
There's Velocity. There's the IBM Insight.
This week is actually OSCON for the first 3 days, and then Velocity for the last 3 days, with overlap on Wednesday in Amsterdam.
I was wondering how they were pulling both of those off in the same week. That makes sense.
Yeah, they're putting the tutorial day, like the joint tutorial/Ignite day, on Wednesday.
Mm.
So
If anyone's trying to do both conferences, I think they're going to be really tired by the time they come to my talk on Friday. They'll just be like, "Cloud native, that sounds great. I need a drink."
Yeah, conferences are exhausting. So what should we
That's right.
talk about today? What's on everyone's mind? There's always new stuff. There's a Kubernetes conference coming up. That's interesting.
That one actually came out of nowhere and surprised me. Maybe it didn't come out of nowhere and it's been being planned all along, but it kind of seems like they pulled that one together in terms of at least the public talk about it in pretty short order, didn't they?
It's been going on for a while. I mean, I saw they've been working on it for a while. There's like a CFP and everything.
Oh, I'm sure. It kind of seemed, if you contrast that with like OSCON's CFP is open right now for 800 bajillion years in the future. It just kind of seemed like it was shorter notice than some of the conferences.
Yeah, I think it's not different than the DevOps days that get thrown together in 2 months, right? It's like,
Dude, we did the first DevOps Days Minneapolis in 147 days. I don't recommend this.
I mean, that's feasible, right? I think people have done them in 60 days. Like,
Sheesh. Was that when Patrick was like running all of them for people, or?
I mean, Patrick definitely took a toll on himself.
I mean, he's going to be here at Velocity EU. I barely got to hang out with him in New York, so I'm excited.
So there's you guys both have talks this week. So let's maybe that's
Let's
an
hear
interesting
it.
topic.
Yeah, Casey, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Sure, sure. So Australia's National Open Source Developer Conference, it's held annually, and that's why I'm here in sunny Hobart. So I'm going to be speaking about my talk title is a little inflammatory, but basically I'm throwing shade on traditional Scrum and Agile processes, and I want to talk about measuring developer effectiveness in order to actually track your efficiency as an organization. So that's my talk. Um, Mostly, I care about, the TLDR is probably that I care about cycle time as one of the more important metrics for whether or not you're an efficient or effective organization. In particular, your ability to respond to change, whether that's something being on fire or an opportunity in the market or whatever. So I want to track development effectiveness in order to reduce that cycle time. And that's also good business incentive for focusing on your delivery pipeline, so automation and operability and production and that kind of thing. Getting getting management to buy into spending time, spending especially engineering cycles on just making things work better can be challenging. But I think that this might be a way to do it, or at least in my experience, I have managed to use this metric for what I see as good. So that's the talk here in Australia.
Nice. So are you also focusing when you mention operability? Are you also focusing on trying to get developers to come on board with the idea of, hey, why don't you think about how you're gonna, I don't know, monitor this in production before it goes to production instead of as an afterthought? Like, are you kind of front loading some of that sort of discussion with developers? Is that something that you can get them to buy into?
I think that that's an iterative prospect. A lot of it is, especially when you have an existing system, you build a lot of what we like to call technical debt, which is sort of nebulous and actually pretty easy for business people to cast off because accumulating debt in a business is often a strategically advantageous thing. Um, but when your system starts to just be horrible to work with, you always want to fix it to make yourself happy. You want good developer tools, you want a good automation, you want a good monitoring and metrics so that you can understand what the hell is going on in production, that kind of thing, as you said. Um, so in order to get the time to actually build those things, you have to find a reason, a business reason that's strategic to get it. And the reduction of time to getting to ship is one of the more important ones.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
so here's a question: are you following, or have you had any discussions with people around the no estimates movement, which has like kind of been a thing for a while?
yeah. So some of my good friends in Pittsburgh, including Carol Nichols, who really hates estimates. She's in the Ruby community and an excellent engineer. She and I actually have talked a lot about this. I don't think that estimates have value because they're entirely just guesses. The best thing that they can do is try and build some measure of false confidence in your ability to deliver. So I don't care as much for estimation as I do tracking. So I still think it's valuable to track the amount of time it took to go from start to finish in order to understand that over time. Um, but
So
using estimates for anything other than very high level calculations is pretty faulty.
So I loathe estimates because I find them to be at best guesses and at worst just, I don't know, making everyone miserable when they realize that it's a guess. But I'm kind of curious, do you like hashtag no estimates on even things like T-shirt sizing? Like, is this going to
That's
take me
interesting.
5 minutes or all of the time, and until the foreseeable future, until the heat death of the universe? Like,
Yeah, t-shirt sizes. So my experience is that t-shirt sizes, for the purposes, especially um, within the organizations I've worked in, t-shirt sizes for quarterly planning is pretty helpful. But again, that's where I talk about, that very gross level. So I'm not into, zero planning because I think that's nonsense. That's just that's just being silly. But estimation at that very high level, just to get a very rough sense of what you might be able to accomplish in 3 months, um, or at least what you can try to guarantee, is not too bad. Yes, so that's where I found it to be helpful.
So here's sort of the dilemma, and I mean I've been up and down and through this, and I don't know how much I influenced Carol's thinking about estimates, but I definitely ranted about them in front of her a couple of years ago. And one of the things that's hard is that, and especially if you're into lean theory and all this stuff, and you already said cycle time, so that's sort of you're already starting to kind of talk lean language, but
Hmm.
it's these types of queues are really dependent on the variability of the things in the queues, right? If you have a lot of variance in the queue, in terms of the size, so then the conundrum is, how do you put things that are a similar size consistently into the queue and yet not estimate? It's like, so the thing that I'm actually against in terms of estimates is the idea that estimates somehow became a contract, somehow became a commitment. When
Right.
that's part of your language and your process, when someone says, "Oh, you have this commitment for this sprint on these points," I just like,
Yeah, I mean, when your guess, when your estimate, which is a word that has a meaning, when your estimate actually becomes a contractual obligation, especially because it gets immediately shoved outside of the product building organization into sales and marketing, who are dependent on this. This is a problem that I found in organizations that sell the future rather than what they have today. Is that they sell what's going to exist in 3 months, and it's a lie every time. And everyone is optimistic because it brings in a check.
I'm laughing because I remember one time that the point at which a couple of startups ago we decided that our CEO should probably not do webinars is when we had two sprints in a row called implement everything that our CEO says we do, part one, and implement everything our CEO says we do, part two.
Yeah. About 10 years ago, I worked for a company where the CEO, who's actually an excellent human being, but
Oh, so was this one.
he liked
Just very
he,
optimistic.
he liked to yeah he liked to do a thing that we called bringing home shiny puppies. And he would go out and talk to people and get really excited about things and bring home this shiny puppy that he committed to someone that wanted to pay us money for it. And then we had to make this shiny puppy exist, and that was some feature or product or whatever, integration. And at one point we had to sit him down and tell him that we need to have a meeting about which shiny puppies we're going to euthanize because we
That's
couldn't keep them
depressing.
all.
well, they keep using the carpet for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I actually sort of can sympathize after like 2.5 days straight standing on the sort of uncomfortable carpet on the concrete floor at the reInvent, X-Hall floor. I sort of can sympathize with somebody is coming to talk to you and they want to know if you have $thing. And you're like, we probably have $thing, or maybe we could have $thing. No, I'm not going to say we have that because I don't think we have that. But I can understand the temptation to say it's probably fine. We could
Well,
probably have that.
when you've got a product and you're like, and then you hear an idea and you're like, that seems like a pretty decent idea, then you're want to say, we should or could or do have that. I get that. The problem is that's a horrible thing to do.
Oh yes, but I can understand the impulse.
Right.
I think product management is a hard job, possibly the hardest job in software. And the hardest part of that job is to strategically saying no. Period.
Yeah. I also think, though, in addition to that, whenever we get into the actual attempting to build the things, engineers are pretty crap at saying no too. We want to appease the gods, and in our world, the people who determine whether or not we're doing the right things and doing them well are our product managers.
Well, the other thing that engineers tend to do, speaking from personal experience, mostly myself, is that we tend to overestimate what we can actually accomplish in a certain amount of time.
Yes.
Oh, in the best case scenario, if like hashtag ops life doesn't happen and nothing is on fire all the time, you could accomplish amazing things.
I mean, I think it's even more complicated than that, actually. Like every engineer is constantly making the decision between doing things right and doing things right now, right? And so like when you get to the point where you're going to implement a feature, the way that this goes right back to this technical debt question, right? Like the way that you decide, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and the way that's reinforced from a cultural perspective has a huge impact on what you end up building over time. And I remember, I mean, there's a bunch of projects, but one that's sort of public and like in the past now is when we were working on Puppet, right? And we had this discussion with Stanford, and this all played out in fairly public way. And they're like, we would really like to be able to interact with with this thing with a RESTful interface. And we're like, yeah, that would be great. It would be cool to do like this RESTful interface to like set up the resources for this Puppet thing. That would be awesome. Let's do that. And Luke estimated that would take 3 weeks, and it actually took about a year. Not because it couldn't have been done faster, actually, because when we got to the point where we were looking at the guts of what we want to expose and how we want to expose it, then to do that in the kind of the do it right now thing was going to create basically cement things that we thought needed to be changed in a way that we weren't willing to do. And so to refactor and decouple the things that needed to be done to make it a RESTful exposed thing, like it's all in the past now, but it definitely brought a bunch of things. Like it was kind of a painful grind to get through that transition.
But it sounds like you made the right decision, because if you had cemented the things you wanted to move away from and gone for the right now, you would have gotten yourself into a horrible quagmire.
It was an existential choice, and then the right choice was definitely made. This is going back to like 2009, right? So like it's way in the past now, but.
But it sounds like, I mean, for the fact that Casey's going to be talking about this at an open source conference this week, these problems don't go away.
No.
Like, specific technical implementations might change, but this kind of choice stuff does not go away.
There are archetypical problems that recur in this software game, right? Like there's everyone's basically doing the same thing but different, and everyone's doing it's like the same movie, right? And if you get it, then like you can start to apply principles to solving these problems. And if you don't, then it seems. I mean, this is where this kind of when we've been talking about cloud native stuff, we talk about cloud native culture too, right? Like it's not enough just to have these tools. It's not enough just to have the whatever container orchestrator. If you don't have a culture of responsibility, a culture of trust, and a culture that's empowered, it doesn't matter. Like you're not going to move fast, and you're not going to move well.
Yeah, one of the big challenges, the thing that you struggled with with your example, Andrew, is when we talk about good, fast, and cheap, pick any two. Oftentimes that decision gets made by accident or not in public or not clearly. It's not deliberate. So one of the big things that you can do to make it better, or that any organization can do to make it better, is to try to articulate the constraints that you're under and the trade-offs you're willing to make, the trade-offs that you need to make. Maybe you need it faster and it has to be shitty right now, but it doesn't. But that shouldn't be a hidden decision or a decision that was made by accident.
That's actually something that at Drama Fever we would put a label on the GitHub issues, labeled technical debt, if we knew we had to do something right now, but we knew it was terrible. So you could actually go and find the ones that we explicitly said, we're making this choice, but we know what we're doing here.
So you had a culture where that was just an explicit, open thing that people recognized, and that made it okay.
It's like
I'm gonna say it was
let's
great.
pay this on the credit card. We'll put it on the credit
Yeah.
card.
Sometimes you have to.
Sometimes, yeah. Then you have to do your expense reports.
Oh.
So the way I'm framing everything now in my own like little mental model of the world, and this kind of bleeds back into this notion of being in a booth or as a salesperson, kind of trying to talk to the future. So everything's about the promises, right? And like what promises can you actually keep?
Right.
So as a person who's not actually going to build anything, you can't actually keep promises, right? So like you need this chain of dependent promises to actually deliver the product.
Mhm.
And I think the way most organizations have evolved, like the process of estimation is an attempt to give some notion of what the promise will be.
And the promises topic actually takes us nicely to what I'm going to be talking about at Velocity EU later this week, which is I'm talking about moving beyond ad hoc automation and looking at structured platforms. And the reason I'm interested in this is because I've spent a lot of time automating all the things, sometimes with whatever tool was at hand or whichever tool seemed like one I felt like using, and then turned out to be a terrible, terrible idea. Um, and I feel like if I've spent enough time tripping over this, and it seems like other people have too, then maybe it's useful to talk about what constraints are you willing to accept in order to have a certain level of guarantees that things are going to work the way you expect, and how to make those decisions. And this is not a product pitch, and it's not a specific product talk, though obviously Cloud Foundry is, weighing heavily on my mind when I'm thinking about all the decisions I've made and all the things that I kind of shake my fist at past self for. But I think it's really interesting to think about where those trade-offs lie. Like one good example I think is that the way a lot of tools, and not just Cloud Foundry, but the way a lot of tools do autoscaling doesn't explicitly use the AWS autoscaling. Well, there's a reason for that if you want to be able to move easily between clouds. Is that a trade-off that you're willing to make? I mean, maybe in some cases. So.
I think, yeah, that's always this is like such a broad topic when you start to think about like all the different layers that we've already kind of identified. I think
Mm-hmm.
going back to saying no, like choosing to not do certain things, like choosing to say, okay, like we're not going to do this thing because like it has this benefit, but the cost of it is higher than the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the cost of running this thing this way means when it fails, it's gotta be like built back up this other thing, right? Like how many write-ups did we have to go through in the last 4 or 5 years about like someone running some database? I'm not going to name any where they like lost data or whatever. Like the operational impact of each of your choices, like you carry that forward until you decide not to do that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, like there's no example of a large organization that's really killing it in the kind of cloud native sense of the word that just lets people do whatever they want. Like they can do whatever they want in the constraints of what their platforms provide. Like
Exactly.
as an employee inside of Google, like what you have access to bring online, what you have access to manipulate, like that's pretty powerful. That's awe-inspiring actually, but it's not whatever, right? Like, and you'll hear the other side of that. There's people at Google that will complain though, like I can't use this one shiny thing. I gotta do this other thing.
I know people who work at Google who sat down and looked at, Kibana with me and were like, I want that. I don't have that. It's like, well, you work at Google.
Well, I
There's
think
pluses and minuses to this.
it's interesting to see it evolve because, like, if you go back into the past, which is my favorite word, as everyone knows, the history, the archaeology, Google had their platform. Basically, they exposed their platform, and the thing about that initial attempt to do that was the paradigm that Google was giving you was very different than what most people were ready to do, right? So it's like Google's like, hey, here's the way we do things. That's how you have to do them. We guarantee it will scale to the end of the earth, right? And like people didn't need that. They just wanted like their little SQL database, right? And so when you force people to go to this new paradigm, yeah, your benefits were one, but you didn't get these other things. But that's actually what I want to force people to think about. Like, what are the contracts that you're willing to make? What are the promises that you're able to keep? The reason that Google's platform, initial platform, the App Engine was built the way it was, is because it could keep promises. It could keep promises about scalability, right? And it did that by choosing not to allow you to do certain things.
Well, that's something that I've been in, an organization that struggled with. Like, so when Drama Fever moved to using containers for everything, this made a very explicit, very clear line of you have to deliver something that can be built on Jenkins, and the end result of that Jenkins build will be, a Docker image. Like, that's what you have to deliver. And if somebody, if a developer came along and wanted to ship something else a different way, we're like, no, I'm not going to deploy that. And it's like, that is kind of, I think we had a new person or two start, and they were like, but I just want to do this. I just want to have this little thing. And it's like, you still need to actually ship it in the way that we're expecting to run it.
Well, it still needs to be operable.
Exactly.
So that brings up an interesting contract, right, between developers and operations. And I used to take a poll about once a year. I don't know when the last time I asked this question, but I used to ask people on just like my informal Twitter poll, like, in your organization, who is in charge of deploying, developers or operators? And depending on what kind of organization, it was about 50-50, where it seems like the smaller organizations, the developers were more likely to be the ones that did deployments. And then in the majority of the enterprise organizations, operations was the deployer.
Yeah. I prefer robots to be the deployer.
Sure. We live
But
we live in that place now.
yeah.
But even then, who pushes the robots? Who tells the robots what to do?
Well, that's an interesting thing. So my last the last company I worked for, where I was building products and running a DevOps team, kind of a weird glue role. There was actually a completely separate release team, which technically reported into the engineering organization, but didn't build product either. Part of that was an attempt to appease the regulators, to make sure that there was some independent party actually pushing the button, which is kind of an enterprise-y problem.
Indeed. It's also a great way to solve your silo problems by adding more.
Additional, yeah, walls, exactly.
Yes, the build team and the release team, and I think that's one of the things where, yeah, if you have tooling that's built to allow the robots to do it, then you've moved your problem to a different place. Instead of deciding who you're going to give the product credentials to, it's who are you going to give the deploy robot credentials. And maybe that decision needs to be in product or somewhere else. Like,
So,
who's making the decision about what goes out? And also, that kind of brings us back to what you and I were talking about the other day, Casey, in terms of, I think you tweeted something about how, hey, like, deploys shouldn't be an event. So if you can decouple the we've put new code out from the we've put new features out, however you want to do that, then it becomes less of an event.
yeah, I actually think that that's probably that might be the key to converting an organization where operations manages deployments to developers being able to actually do deployments. When your deployment is an event, there are a whole lot of trust issues that come into play. Operations expects the deployment to be a failure because enough of them have been a failure in the past. That's what we expect. And frankly, developers just have their fingers crossed, hoping that it is no failure. I've known very few teams that can actually say with certainty when you put this in production, it's going to work without a problem.
Well, going back to the plot of the movie,
Yep.
you can remove some of those problems and increase that confidence if the process that you use to put code into your test environment or your development environment is the same as it is to put it
Exactly.
into the production environment.
Right. Which
Yeah.
goes back to the contracts and constraints and who's actually doing the deployments. Yeah, it's all tied together.
And
Furthermore, if your deployments aren't events, that means that they are small batch sizes, small change. This is another wheel that we've all been around. I know Andrew's spoken about it a bunch, but you do need to reduce the risk of any change by making them as small as possible, and then you can make them more frequent.
Well, the strategy there, I mean, kind of there's the strategy where if anything's painful, then you should just do it a lot, like until the pain goes away. It's hard to get people to do that for obvious reasons, but it actually works pretty well. But the reason you go to small batches is not that you're lowering the chance of the actual there being a problem, it's that the problem will be smaller, right? The
and
problem
it'll
Yeah.
definitely be more obvious because you know exactly what changed.
the problem will be obvious. If you just change one line of code and you push it to production and all of your graphs change, you're like, I wonder which line it is.
Yeah. Yeah, being able
Um,
to isolate is the key. Absolutely.
Yeah, we did start doing that at Eighth Bridge, the ad tech startup I was working at. But one of the problems with that is because we were the dreaded third-party cookie on a lot of sites. Um, if we made one change and put it out there, and then it had a bad effect, then we maybe would have somebody in like client success asking us why we didn't tell them that we were about to do a thing, because now they have to, assuming it was noticeable, and hopefully it wasn't, or we could fix it really quickly. But assuming it was noticeable, they might have to go have a conversation with a company that sells a lot of toys or something.
So in cloud native after dark choose your own adventure style, there's two topics that have just come up in my head that I'm interested in talking about. One is making everyone do customer support. And the other one is, and I don't know if you guys watched this video, but I put it in our Slack channel a while ago, the 6 Laws of Reliable Systems from Joe Armstrong.
I must have missed that one. I'll have to go back and watch
I
it.
also failed to watch it.
It's
I
like
generally watch the videos that Andrew puts on our channel with amusing results.
it might have been interleaved with like a Josh Long rant that was like
That means that I might have had all notifications suppressed.
scrolling the screen.
I am interested in this idea of everyone doing support because
Yeah.
the organizations that, I've done some amount of support at, I feel like I definitely knew what was going on, versus like if you're not involved with support at all, like you're getting it filtered through other people's perceptual filters, what's going on from the customer point of view.
Yeah. I worked with a company where the engineering team. This was a relatively young startup, although selling to enterprises, doing both SaaS and appliances actually. And the engineering organization, the folks building the software, rotated that each week someone was what we called, the face of engineering. There was actually an email address that anyone could, and it was basically escalated support. You could email the face at thiscompany.com and get the person who was basically on call to just handle that. Now, what that meant was actually you were rotated out of any critical path engineering efforts, so you didn't have normal work to do that week, except you could help others, but you were never critical path on anything that was ongoing for that week. That worked out really well. It meant we got very first-hand knowledge about whatever was bothering the customer. Then there's empathy that gets built from that kind of experience, and also a clear understanding of how people are really trying to use your product. I'm all in on this idea, so works for me.
In most organizations, no one has more understanding of the product than customer support. The interface between your actual product and the customer. I mean, go figure. And
Right.
then and then they're often given the least priority to participate in the conversation.
Well, I mean, I guess it just depends on exactly how your organization has, like your engineering, ops, whatever, talk to customer support. But like, we had at Drama Fever, we had at least the head of customer support, I think possibly occasionally some other people, actually sat in the tech channel on Slack. And if something was wrong, they would see us talking about it. And we would we would definitely say Jeremy, hey, just so you know, this is going on. If people are noticing this, we're going to have it fixed in, this amount of time or whatever. But like having them be a first-class citizen in chat with the, people who are actually solving the problem, I think is kind of nice.
I think there's a question of mass too, right? If you're at a company the size of Drama Fever,
like 120 people.
Yeah, then it's like starting to be when you're at thousands of people, it's like a different equation, right? And like when you're a startup with 3 people or 12 people or whatever, like it's a different thing. But I just think my opinion, observing many software projects, many products, that there's almost always things that can be immediately addressed that will make everyone's life better. That's like buried in the knowledge of the customer support organization. That's like never sees the light of day unless there's like some enlightened conversation that happens.
Well, when I was in London for operability, I went and visited the UK government digital services, just because I know people who work there. So I thought, hey, I'll go get a tour, see what GDS team is all about. And one of the things that I got to find out was like some of the people on their platform team were doing their customer service rotation that week. And it's like it's exactly what you're describing, like what Casey was saying about them not being in the critical path for a project. Instead, like they're doing support that week, which I think, yeah, that is pretty great. I mean, like I said, I've done that, but not in this exact role. More in the when I worked at Quest a million years ago, like we were kind of considered tier 3, which just meant that the people who did the outsourced support would eventually escalate things to tier 2, which actually was in our building, and then we would have one person from our team have a fishing pole sitting in their cubicle. And then the people from tier 2 would come over and bug that person when they needed help with something.
The one with the fishing pole. So I have a bunch of notes about experiments I want to do in an organization when I get to be the one who makes all the bad decisions.
Right.
And one of them is that every person, as their onboarding process, will be required to spend at least 2 weeks in customer support. Like that's how you onboard, no matter what your role is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sounds great.
And then, at least, I don't know. It kind of depends on the size of the org and some other dynamics. But I kind of want someone from every org doing a rotation through customer support once a month.
When do we get to do that?
We can probably I don't get to make all the bad decisions at Pivotal, but we could talk about. I'm sure they would actually let us if we wanted to.
I mean, I already want to go back and do another, longer rotation with the ops team, but
it's an idea. I'm up for it.
Yeah, I'm into it. I wanted to mention. So another interesting thing is one of my application teams at my previous company. We had a pretty consistent 1 hour or less turnaround time from hearing about a customer affecting issue and getting it fixed in production. Our average was about an hour.
nice.
But so there are some cultural and organizational anti-patterns, though, which is if you do have a culture which tends to silo and you have organizations or people who want to be information gates, then it could take us, and unfortunately we have this situation. Sometimes we didn't actually hear about the customer pain for a week, but we could fix it in an hour. So I just started to go directly to customer success, they call them customer success, and say, hey, if you hear about a thing and it's affecting this section of the customer experience, just just let us know directly, and we'll get it sorted out because we had enough of the controls and keys to get it sorted out and deployed again, like within an hour usually. And our team, I made it a pretty serious priority that you stopped working on anything else if a customer had an issue and called it in, because that's big enough to fix it immediately. And so we took it pretty seriously, but again, sometimes it took us a very long time to hear about it, which is a problem.
So what do you think is the motivation behind somebody not telling you about a customer affecting problem?
So bureaucracy and paperwork is a really good way to get people to just not bother. So if you just have um, a lot of gates and processes that get in the way of people talking and connecting because the process or the paperwork is more important, I think it's a matter of what you value. Going back to values.
If you required people to file a ticket, they'll probably just not want to do it at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, like a ticket is easy, but if you're going to get yelled at by, your boss and your boss's boss for crossing, hierarchical bounds and going and talking to a developer directly, then you're not going to do that. And I mean, if you've got like a willing participant on the other side that you can, send a text message to, not on the company network, that kind of thing, then maybe you'll like be bothered to get around it. These are, obviously what we're describing are cultures that I would say are probably toxic or not really efficient or effective.
Yeah,
But they exist.
Pathological is the word I like.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of something that was a reasonably long time ago, but I can probably admit that I have been in a position where I'm getting text messages from somebody on the other side of a political divide, and then we have to pretend that we don't actually know about the thing, but can guide towards it, since we really do know.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that there's probably someone who cares in every team in an org, right? And even if you're in a pathological, environment, it might seem like, oh, everybody in engineering, could care less about what the customer's going through. That's not true. It might be the case that culturally it appears that that's the case, but I would encourage anyone, go and find the individuals, go out to lunch, go get coffee, whatever. There are people who care in every part of your organization. And if you can find a way to just break down those silos and work with them directly, you can get things done.
Oh, hey, I'm noticing Andrew's wearing a DevOps Duke Minneapolis t-shirt. Awesome.
It's true. It's great sleepwear.
They're comfy, soft t-shirts.
But I'm down. We'll go on a side rant for a second. Like I'm way into organic cotton over the tri-blends that people like now. They're like way better. I don't even. It's not even a contest. It feels better on your skin, and then they just hold up better.
Yeah,
so you're making t-shirts organic cotton.
But I gotta say, the tri-blend ones dry better if you're washing them in a hotel sink. And if you decide to go on a 2-week trip with a tiny backpack, you will be washing them in a hotel sink.
That one use case where you're basically trading them, they get nappy faster, like they just wear out faster.
Sure.
Organic cotton.
So I also like t-shirts with stretch in them, better than t-shirts without.
Organic cotton they have a little bit of play. I mean,
a little bit. But in any case.
Once you go organic cotton, you won't go back. All right, so how about this Joe Armstrong talk that I put online, and it's actually old. Okay. I mean, when I say old, it's like, I don't know, I was referencing it in like 2010, so it was actually posted. 2009. End of 2009. Does everyone know who Joe Armstrong is?
Mm-mm.
Nope.
So he's like this adorable guy who wrote this thing called Erlang.
Oh, okay.
And
NBD.
Yeah, and he's really smart, and he thought about things a little bit, and he gave this talk called Systems That Never Stop, and then in parentheses in Erlang. And it's going to take an hour to watch it at some point, but the main thing that the points that he makes is like all these things it's like laws of physics basically. Like if you can do these 6 things, then you can build systems that are never going to stop. And if you can't do these 6 things, like any one of them, like you're basically screwed. Like you're going to fail. You're going to fall. So the 6 laws of reliability, and so like there's all these things that are out there that like tell you how to do this stuff. Like people are talking about trying to build these distributed systems, like these fault tolerant systems, cloud native systems. Most of them don't know what they're doing. Like they're not thinking clearly about the problem yet, right? And so like there's pieces you can get with the microservice architectures and like having service discovery and circuit breakers and all that stuff helps. But if you really understand these principles, like I think it helps you think more clearly about why those other components serve any purpose whatsoever. So like it might be fun to actually go through so like the Netflix stuff, the Spring Cloud stuff, and like draw each one of them back to some of the laws of reliability. Anyway, so
Yeah,
this
I just went and found the link that you put on Slack because Slack searches. And yeah, I'll grab this and do the download it to my Computron and enjoy it while crossing the Atlantic back.
well, we can talk about
way
a
back.
little bit before you get a chance to watch it.
Okay.
And I used to put the 6 laws of reliability in, I don't know, probably every talk I did for a year and a half after I watched this. It just had such an impact on the way that I thought about the problems that I was trying to solve. Just because it brought a certain clarity, right, that I didn't have before. And then I also have such an appreciation for Erlang, and at least the way that it was constructed. There's also things I would criticize, but the way that we're going about trying to build these microservice architectures, and I tweeted this probably a year ago now, or 9 months ago or something. It's basically that like every sufficiently advanced microservice architecture has a ad hoc bug-ridden implementation of half of Erlang. Like that's basically what we're trying to do. So the 6 laws are, and I'll just read them in order, and then maybe we could play with them like in the conversation. It's this notion of isolation, which means basically if one thing fails, it shouldn't like bring everything else down. Like failures are isolated from each other. A notion of concurrency. Basically, that things need to be able to do things concurrently. Then these other things get to be really, really opsy. Failure detection, fault identification, because he separates the fact that you know something is wrong from the fact that you know what is wrong, right? And then live code upgrade. That one is a killer, right? So you need to be able to do live code upgrades. If you want to build systems that never stop, you need to be able to do live code upgrades. Period. That's the deal, right? And then last but not least, and this gets really really crazy in the world we're moving to now with like super ephemeral container world. You need stable storage. You need to be able to trust that when you write something that it's written. Not naming.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, you can use containers for your apps, but keeping your state in containers is an entirely different question.
I mean, like, containers are not a thing. It's a process on a computer. Like, people are being dumb, but whatever. Like, you could put.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of keeping my state in something that is liable to go away any moment.
Right. So saying stable storage has a few implications. There's obviously don't lose anything. You know, you actually have to trust that your data gets saved, or it's at least not lost. It will eventually be saved. From an app development perspective, that also means that as your expectations of the shape of your data change, being able to orchestrate and plan out live code upgrade and changing the expectation of the shape of your storage, so schema changes, that sort of thing, is
Forwards
definitely,
and backwards compatible.
yeah, that takes a lot of freaking work. Like
It takes a lot of
it's
discipline.
no joke. Yeah.
Wait.
And let's be honest, many of the systems that are in place that people are trying to use were not designed to do this, and they will resist your implementation of like being able to do that. Like they just are not designed to be upgraded in a live fashion, and they won't guarantee that forward and backwards compatibility.
Well, so this entirely gets to your point on what promises can you keep, and also, when your application frameworks are not built to support this notion, it means that you have to do a lot of extra work. It muddies your code. So as an application engineer, I'm looking at my beautiful implementation of my object relational mapping storage mechanism, and if you're asking me to keep two different ways of storing data at play at any given time, if you're asking me to do things like feature flags, if I haven't really bought into these concepts, all you're really asking me to do is make my application internals look like garbage. And there's a lot of pushback on that, and this is where this kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm taking a step back, but you need to, in order to make the constraints worth it, the promises have to be worth it too. So how do we convince application engineers?
If the benefit isn't greater than the cost, like, why bother?
Right. And obviously, at the scale that large systems are working at these days, at the complexity and the interplay between the services, whether you're writing them or you're using them such as storage, there's a lot to work with there. It's hard to keep everything up or operating, even if there is failure in the first place.
Scale, one, breaks everything, right? And then two, it's a crucible that like gets rid of a bunch of bad ideas. Like it will force you, everything that is inoperable like goes away really, really fast if you have to run at scale, because god damn it, that sucks. Like, and it's so painful, and then the cost is so high, it just like burns it out of your system.
Right. I mean, anything that seems like an okay idea, if you have to do it one time or a small number of n times, seems like a completely untenable idea once you have to do it n times.
Right. So, and I'm gonna keep saying this over and over until everyone in the world believes it. Like the most important sentence in the Borg paper is the sentence that says that the applications that run on Borg have an embedded web server that broadcasts the metrics from those applications, right? The metrics that, like, those applications know their own health. So that is baked into those systems that you can do fault detection, right? Like that application just told you it's not healthy.
And if you have health checks, they also can't be full of deceit and lies, right? I mean, this is kind of part of the problem of like.
Are you challenging me? Is this a test? Because
no, I'm saying that you can't have a health check that just returns 200. Everything is okay if it's not.
I bet I could, but it's not.
I mean.
Oh no, right. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. I have dealt with the fallout from an application that does exactly that, and so I am asserting that people should not do that.
Yeah.
And they cannot do that if they want to remain happy.
This is what is the value of your metrics? Is it that your web server is still up, or is it that your customers can use your application? Like, what matters?
I don't know if everyone else has this same story or lived this movie before, but I've actually been on an application as a developer, and I was sort of playing this role where it's like I was the developer that cared, and like the application was down, and I knew it was down, and I'm calling the ops people, and they're like, no, it's up. I'm like, dude, it is down. Like, I know it's down. And we probably spent a good 10, 15 minutes where they're like, well, we can ping it and we can do this stuff. And it's like, no, it's down. Like, just believe me, it's down. Like, figure out what's wrong. And there's a couple different scenarios. That happened more than once, right? And sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, we're pinging the thing from inside the same thing that has the network. And, like, we lost our, like...
I knew you were going to go with internal and external network.
We can't route to the internet, but it's like it seems great right here in the NOC.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, which is exactly why you do have to have some kind of external check.
No, like that. How many times does that happen?
It's totally happened.
Preach. Yeah.
Are we telling people something that they already know? This is the Casey and I were kind of talking about this, like the trying to figure out if we're telling people stuff that they're just going to say, well, yeah, or if maybe this
So
has not occurred to everyone.
I don't know. I
I
mean,
don't
I
know.
have a hard time with that because I feel like I've basically been repeating myself for the last 5 years, and people are always like, "That's that's brilliant," or "That's so new," and I'm like, "No, I actually like you should have watched Joe Armstrong in 2009. It would have been
So
fine."
yeah, my take is I think a lot of people probably recognize these things, but the real challenge, and this is the challenge universally, I think, is knowing how to apply it. So you can say, yeah, I get it, but you probably don't have any way. You might not have any way of actually making this real within your own set of circumstances. So I think it's totally reasonable to keep saying these things and just try any new way of explaining it that might help another person with their specific circumstance. Because
I think that that's true. What you just said is true, but I think there's actually another phenomenon, which is that the future is not evenly distributed, and that even though this stuff is something that a small number of people think is obvious and have been doing and saying for a while, that the preponderance of people, when you look at this narrative around cloud native and this transformation that's happening in IT across a bunch of different industries, as they all recognize that IT is no longer a cost center, and if you treat it like one, like you're going to lose because you just have this self-fulfilling prophecy that puts you at a disadvantage to everyone who's using it as a competitive advantage. And that transition, there's only so many people that are kind of in that leading bastion across the chasm, and like the rest of that world is still kind of waiting for the message. Like they're just starting to turn onto it. So
yeah,
I think that while in some ways it does get repetitive, there's definitely a bunch of people that really want to hear it. Like they haven't heard it, they haven't felt it. They feel it in their bones maybe, but they just haven't had something to say it out loud to them.
I think you're right, especially about the unevenly distributed thing. Even people who do understand don't always work someplace currently where they have the resources to even implement anything that they understand. So, you have the one person ops team who knows perfectly well that they would really like to, I don't know, containerize all the things or whatever, but instead they maybe barely have some configuration management, or they have a bunch of, carefully hand-whittled EC2 instances that the one person I'm thinking of, I did actually talk them into taking an AMI of the instances that they had spent a bunch of time hand whittling. Because I was like,
yeah,
this is not the person that we had that conversation with at a Code for America summit. Though you'll recollect we had a similar conversation. This is actually somebody that I know elsewhere who was just saying, hey, I'm a little bit worried about this scenario. How do we get a little better? And I'm like, well, you're in Amazon. At least take an AMI of the instances. Then if everything goes terribly pear-shaped, you have some place to climb back up from.
right.
But I mean,
So
and this is somebody who knows perfectly well, but they can't implement because they're one person and don't have organizational support for putting the time into actually getting better.
this also reinforces that on a day-to-day basis, you're making a decision between doing things right and doing things right now, and it's often a function of resources, right? A function of resources and also your experience. So it's like if I knew how to do this already better, I would do it better. But I have to kind of do it wrong a few times to get there because I'm not tapped into. I mean, that's one of the things I feel like has been a um, huge success for things like DevOps Days and Velocity is that you have this community of practice where you can reinforce each other's good behaviors. You can reinforce each other's learning.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. The most valuable conversation I was a part of at DevOps Days Boston was um, how do we get legacy apps running on the cloud, which was pushed for by someone. She was a CTO of a system or of a company that was around for about 15 years, and she knew it was the right thing to do, And she understood the theory behind the various technical decisions that she would make, but her biggest problem was often, it's always people, was how do I convince my organization to move in this direction without like burning every bridge to make it happen. And there was a huge conversation among people at every stage of their own journey, from I'm already there to mostly I'm somewhere in the mess of it. And that's really valuable. Everyone there needed that conversation, though, to continue to reinforce the path they were on.
All
That's
right,
one of the
well,
things that's so great about open space at
I
a
love.
DevOps Days or any other conference that does open space to get you just to that place. You like that, Andrew?
I would do conferences that are all open space, but you can't get anyone to come to them.
Yeah.
It's harder to sell it to your management. Like
No, I get it.
showing them a slate of like set stuff makes them say, okay, you can go to that.
I deliberately engineered that format for that very reason. But I have a new idea for a conference that I wanted to do for a while. I want to have a conference where everything is a debate, like a formal structured debate where one person has one side of it and the other person has the other side of it.
And you can walk
So
away and be friends afterward.
this actually leads very nicely into the coming to you soon on an episode of Arrested DevOps. In this corner, we're gonna have Mr. Andrew Clay Schaefer.
That is not. That is not.
Oh, now you're not gonna do that?
No, it's not going to be a structured debate. Like
No.
what I'm talking about is you have like structured speeches in favor of a position and against a position, with cross-examination and rebuttals, like
High school style.
a very formal debate.
Yeah.
I have never participated in like
Like
a debate club or whatever.
I have.
I mean, clearly.
Um,
What do you see? What do you see as the benefit of doing it that way?
I think it brings, because in most conference talks, like there's no counterpoint, right? Like someone just like spews their confirmation bias on you, and if you happen to like resonate with that confirmation bias, then you think it's great, and if you don't, then it's like, okay, that was bad. And I just want to really draw out like where people have different opinions, and like some of them are good on both sides. Like I just want to see like certain things be talked about, like in a way that is more structured. I don't want it to be like because I think sometimes people think of like debate as sort of this pejorative, like, oh, they're arguing. But it's like it's actually bringing a formality to taking a structured counter position to an argument that I think would be beneficial.
So, in this scenario, would you try to have two sides, or what if there's more than two ways to approach a specific problem? Would you have
Uh,
more than two? How do you plan to do that?
you can't do that. I mean, it just gets too insane, right? Like there's definitely things that are multidimensional, but I think for the sake of having it, you like pick two people that you think will have, and you don't necessarily want people that have like totally attached their ego to those positions, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not trying to just like have a pissing match between two people who are emotionally attached to the issue, but like get people that have like you think thoughtful, respectful representation for those positions, and like let them have a discussion. And I think I think it would be good for the industry, and I think it'd be fun. And it's all about me. So
I mean, I think that sounds great, but they did actually do, and I didn't go to it. I think there was some reason that I went to something else, but they had like a debate at Velocity. Um,
it was a panel, and it was kind of different.
yeah,
Than what I'm talking about.
I don't think it was exactly like that, but it was some sort of Velocity debate club. I think they might be doing it again at Velocity EU. I'll have to look and see. I barely looked at the schedule. I like just looked at the schedule in the last day and went, "Hey, you're gonna be there, and you're gonna be there, and yay, a whole bunch of people." So
Yeah, it's summer camp, except summer's gone now.
yeah, it's
I think
fall.
I think you could put this together to do a trial run at a conference as a straight up talk opportunity.
Actually, what I'm thinking about doing is instead of having it be a full conference, we could just do it as hangouts. Like you just get two people and you like announce a time and you can do like a live stream hangout of like two different positions. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like I was saying earlier, I am going to have Andrew and Kelsey Hightower come and talk about structured and unstructured platforms on Arrested DevOps, which I think will be fun.
Yeah, but it won't be a debate.
It won't be, I don't think it'll be a formal debate. I think it'll be a discussion.
It'll just be me and Kelsey violently agreeing about a lot of stuff.
Using different words.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we're a good hour and 5 minutes in. I don't know if I got any secrets, but I don't know. It's going to be crazy. Like I said, there's so much. I expect a bunch of announcements from a bunch of different things. Oh, the other thing that we should probably say, even though it's the end, and like there's a Cloud Foundry Summit in a week, right?
There
Basically.
is. And I'll be there, and Casey will be there. You're actually going right from Australia to Berlin, right?
No big deal. I'll probably make it.
Why did you fly the way you did? Like it seems like you would have been faster to go to the West Coast.
I called up the travel agency and said this is what I need to do because the policy said call the travel agency if you need to do this thing, and this is what they said was the right thing to do.
What was the thing you needed to do?
I needed to get to OSDC Australia, and then I needed to go from there to Berlin, and then I needed to go home. So I needed to go around the world westward, which is like the worst way to do it apparently. But
Well, so when you fly back, you'll just fly right back to Europe, right?
so yeah, I'll fly from here directly to Berlin, and then from there to Pittsburgh, via Chicago. But that's like no big deal.
Got it.
As long as you don't end up in Chicago overnight.
If I end up in Chicago overnight, at least I will have lots of people in Chicago that I can go and like, I don't know, we'll talk about the cloud native journey all night long. That'll be fun.
Why not?
Yeah.
That'd be good.
There's
Dallas was more challenging.
there's a pivotal office in Chicago, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cloud Foundry Summit Berlin. I think it'll be fun.
It should
There'll probably be announcements.
There'll be some great talks. I think there's going to be some, whatever people in the ecosystem doing some PR stuff. It's a good time. It's always going to be. It's going to be interesting to see as the thing marches forward, who comes to the party.
Oh, Casey and I are going to the Cloud Credo Bosch all-day thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of training with Colin and the Cloud Credo guys. There's also the unconference the day before the posted schedule.
Which Casey is doing a lightning talk at.
That's right. Yeah, I'm going to give a reprise of the talk I gave at Velocity in New York on redefining culture fit.
That cloud native culture fit, like a glove.
Yep.
All right. So unless anyone has any parting wisdom, I think I should go to bed so I can get up and take my kids to school.
It sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, sleep so you can be an operable human being.
Operability, it's important.
I mean, I've been doing this for years. Poorly. but
Right.
But here we are.
It's working out okay so far.
It's probably fine.
Yeah.
Go team, probably fine. All right, I'll see you guys. Have fun at your events.
Take care.
Cheers.